to recognize in America the power for parents, for our educational system, and even our employers to recognize is that students with straight A's view education as their solution. Students with 3 points, 2 points, and 1 point tend to view education as their problem. And we have to shift that in America today if we're going to move and save future generations for themselves, because it must become everybody's solution. The only way to do that is to make competitive advantage the thing they're building and not high academic grades.
Welcome to Leadership, the podcast where leadership meets real-world insights. In each episode, you can eavesdrop on exclusive conversations with top thought leaders, best-selling authors, and experts in leadership, communication, relationships, culture, and everything else that shapes your effectiveness in the workplace and in your personal life. Leadership is here for you. Now, here's our host, himself a seasoned coach and best-selling author, Dr. Roger Dean Duncan.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Leadership. In many situations, the smartest questions you can ask will begin with the word why. Think about that. Have you noticed the inquisitiveness of young children? As long as they're encouraged to do so, they seem to ask questions endlessly. They want to know how things work. They want to know the purpose of things. They want to know why. And their thirst for knowledge and understanding accelerates their learning. In countless workplaces over the years, I've noticed that new hires often ask the best questions. Why is this procedure in place? Why was that process adopted? Why is this step required? Why hasn't this been considered? A fresh set of eyes can often spotlight something that warrants a new look. In that environment, there may be stereotypes that need to be jettisoned. Sure, some of the younger generations may warrant the negative labels, but most do not. Many in the so-called Y generation, composed of the Millennials and Gen Zs, are ambitious and entrepreneurial. They are bright and creative. They are kind and generous. They are our future. So, shouldn't we do everything possible to help them find their way in the marketplace of ideas and worthy work? Mark Perna thinks so, and he's my guest for this episode of Leadership. Mark is founder of a company that works with businesses and schools across the nation to help them attract and retain significantly more of the right employees and students in the right positions and the right programs for the right reasons. Mark's award-winning book is titled Answering Why: Unleashing Passion, Purpose, and Performance in Younger Generations. Frequently cited as a national expert in education, enrollment, retention, and performance, Mark has ideas on how to empower upcoming generations to turn the business world on its head. Mark, welcome to Leadership.
Roger, what an honor to be with you.
Appreciate your taking the time.
Well, yeah. Thank you for taking the time. I think this is going to be a great conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
I've been looking forward to it. Many people in older generations label younger people as entitled, unfocused, and even lazy. Many younger workers, the so-called Y generation, attach equally unflattering labels to their seniors. So what's the key to not just calling a truce, but mutual understanding and appreciation so the generations can learn and collaborate together for the greater good?
I think it's a matter of simply understanding where younger generations have shifted today. And a lot of it, stems from, where things have changed, right? The world's completely changed. I don't think anyone, Roger, would disagree with us that the world has completely changed, even in the last few months for that matter, right? It seems to change almost on a daily basis. And one of the things about the generations is that younger generations, I think very differently about them. I'm a generational expert, and yet I only talk about one generation today. And I think it's pivotal to understand that the answer in your question is actually born from the fact that young people today, Gen Z, which is somewhere between the ages of 10 and 28 years old, and Gen Alpha coming up behind them, are the most extraordinary generations to come down the pike. People think that they're lazy and they're entitled and they're all these different things, but the truth is that they're extraordinary. I think they're the most intelligent, resourceful, pit bull-like generations that we've ever seen in this country. When they see something they want, they'll truly move heaven and earth to get there. Our challenge though, as parents, educators, employers, and older generations, is getting them to want something. And that's really where the battlefield of the future is. And we have to understand that they are in a different place than we think they are. Like if I were to use a visual, and I know this is an audio podcast, but if I hold my hands out here to the left of me and say, this is where we think young people are, and I don't mean politically, I mean, they're just over here on the left side of me, right? We think they're over here. We treat them like they're over here in education, in employment, in our homes, as parents, and we think they're over here, and we're continuing to treat them because previous generations were in fact over here on the left. But when I speak around the nation and I do the things that I do across the country, I try to get across and shift the paradigm in everybody's thinking as parents, educators, and employers that they're not over here on the left. They're actually all the way over here on the right. And they're in a completely different place. And where they are is exceptional, but they are literally waiting for us to deliver a compelling relevance and purpose, that answer to why you were just talking about, relevance and purpose to everything they do. And that's critically important today. And older generations have to recognize that in order to connect with young people and understand is that they have to have this mutual respect. And mutual respect starts from the older generations respecting first, and then younger generations will respect in return. It's all flipped, Roger. When I was growing up, I respected my elders first, and I worked hard to earn their respect. But today it's 180 degrees the other way. Older generations must respect younger generations first and give them that opportunity to turn and around and respect them. It's a mutual respect model they look for.
It's a new paradigm on reciprocity, I guess we could say.
Yeah, that's so true.
Now, between false perceptions and big picture reality, there's clearly an awareness gap. When it comes to understanding different generations, what can be done to close that gap?
Is to recognizing that they, in fact, will not waste time. And I'll say this, is that we tend in older generations to look at younger generations, and we always have a person, they could be in our home, they could be in a classroom, they could be in our place of business, and we look at them and we say, man, that person is completely wasting their time. And the understanding and the aha moments I get around the country are that young people in America today do not waste their time. They never waste at any given moment. They're doing exactly what they want to do, exactly the way they want to do it. They're going to do it for as long as they want to do it. I mean, they may not be doing, Roger, what you and I want them to do,
right?
But that doesn't mean that they're wasting their time. So this is usually an aha moment. I say, you take a person who's wasting their time in your view, right? As a parent, educator, employer, as a community leader, right? They're wasting their time, right? And over, I'm spreading my hands, in a range here, and I'm saying over here is where we really want them to do, right? We want them to do this other thing. And the delta between what they're doing and what we want them to do, right? This delta between us is the compelling relevance and purpose to do what we want them to do. And I ask every audience across the nation, I said, when you look at the young people in your sphere of influence, who are wasting their time or showing up every day to get the job done, how many of us in the audience would love it if the young people in our sphere of influence would show up every day compelled to give their best effort? I get 100% of the audience to raise their hand. Like, of course I want them to show up and give their best effort.
Sure.
I'm like, then I have to ask a reflective question back. How many of us in this audience are actually compelling? And it's there I get an aha moment of, wow, I don't know. Am I in fact compelling? Some people are, some people aren't. But am I being compelling about what a young person needs and why is it important for them to do what we're asking them to do, whatever that may be? If we don't give a compelling answer, they won't come our way, because here's part of where the awareness gap comes in, is being aware that younger generations, Gen Z followed by Gen Alpha, do nothing on faith. Previous generations did things on faith, like trust us, it's going to work out okay in the end.
Right.
Gen Z and Gen Alpha don't trust anything like that because they've seen previous generations do what we ask them to do, and it hasn't turned out well for a lot of them. For some, it has. For a lot, it hasn't. And so they don't do anything on faith. They have to know that there's some personal reward, benefit, return on investment in the work and effort they're going to do. And quite frankly, Roger, older generations are the same way. You and I aren't going to do something unless we see some kind of return on investment of that, of that energy, of those skills. And so we have to be aware of that. And that's part of the awareness gap we have to close.
Well, in previous generations, as you certainly well know, a lot of people would join an organization and that's where they were until they retired. And it doesn't work that way anymore. A lot of younger people change jobs every 3 to 5 years, maybe even sooner.
Yeah.
So that certainly puts the onus on the people who are running the organizations, I think, because it's not good to have that kind of churn in an organization. Now, that brings up a question, and we'll dig a little deeper into what you were just talking about. In many organizations today, there are employees from 2 or 3 or sometimes more generations. How do they see the world differently, and what can they learn from each other?
Well, I mean, I think there's so much that can be learned from each other, but I call younger generations the benchmark generation. I mean, here I am, I'm a generational expert, and I rarely talk about older generations anymore because what's become extremely clear is that if you know what Gen Z thinks, what makes them tick, and how they make decisions, if you understand some of the things we've already spoken about and other things that I go into when I travel the nation, is, if you get what they think, what makes them tick, and how they make decisions, what they want is what every previous generation has wanted. They're just the first generation in history to stand on principle until they get what they want. And that's a powerful understanding. So in order to recognize that if you can solve as an organization what Gen Z is looking for, all the other generations will accept that. Right? They'll accept more flexibility. They'll expect more, work-life blend. They'll accept more, right? Other generations aren't going to turn that down. But I'm here to say that if you can understand what Gen Z, thinks, what makes them tick, and how they make decisions, you can adapt accordingly to them. It'll work for everybody else.
Right. Now, Mark, in your coaching practice, you sometimes refer to a childhood experience that you had with a tree branch. I love the metaphor. Share that story with us, if you would, and explain how it applies to life management skills and to the work that you do today.
Yeah, sure. So when I was 10 years old, I was up in a tree. I'm at the age where, when you back up to 10 years old, that's where we lived out our imagination. And I'm in the tree with a couple of my friends. I'm up 28 to 30 feet. It's a perilous height. I mean, it's that, oh, wow height. And I'd been there before. I was pretty comfortable about it. I moved away from the trunk. I was standing out on a really firm limb. I was surveying the world around me. Things looked great, right? Until the branch underneath me cracked. Can you imagine this happening? Right? It's where you have that, that feeling in the pit of your stomach, right? And so there are 3 critical things that happen at that moment. Number 1, you become singularly focused, right? It didn't matter what stresses and challenges I had getting into the tree. It didn't matter who I thought was cute at school. I was now focused on the task at hand. Second thing that happens is you start strategic planning, right? How am I going to get back to the safety of the trunk? What am I going to grab? Where am I going to fall? How's this going to work out, right? And then the third, and probably most critical at that point, is action, right? You take action. In fact, I submit to you, Roger, you take massive action. And all 3 of those things, literally focus, plan, action, literally happen in the blink of an eye. See, I believe that the branch creaks in our lives many times, right? Anytime there's a fear of loss or a sense of urgency, the branch creaks a little bit and it forces us to focus, to plan, and to take action. And in my own life, this has great, merit to it. And because when I was 34 years old, and this is kind of the way I bring the metaphor to life, when I was 34 years old, I had the worst year of my life. When I was 34, I was forced to file bankruptcy due to a failed business venture that had happened in my life. My bad, my fault. I mean, I made bad decisions, bad investments, went belly up. During that same year, I also went through a divorce, became a single dad. That same year, because of the bankruptcy, I was forced to take a job where I wasn't making enough money to support the 3 of us. And that same year, I weighed over 400 pounds. I mean, my branch was creaking literally, emotionally, psychologically. I'll never forget it. I remember sitting down in a very modest home and looking out the window and thinking to myself, man, Mark, if things are going to change, you're going to have to change. And if things are going to get better, you're going to have to get better. And it was at that moment that the branch was creaking in my life. And so I focused, I planned, I took action over the next 13 months. I lost 175 pounds and have managed to keep it off. During that same time period, I started this company. And in 27 years, I've gone from the worst moments of my life to, where I am today as I'm an international thought leader, and I can go on and on about all the things that I've accomplished to this point. But, the difference between, where I started and where I am today is extraordinary. And it's because of the Branch Creek moment in my life. And so the metaphor plays out as, I believe the greatest moments of growth in our lives, any of our lives, is when in fact the branch creaks in our life. When we have that fear of loss or that sense of urgency that makes us start focusing, planning, and taking action. And I think these are the golden moments of life. At least they have been in my life. And so I recognized that in order to be successful and, bring my life to where it is today, I needed to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And so I built a plan around in my life of continually being uncomfortable, putting myself in situations that make me uncomfortable. And it's made all the difference in the world, because the more the branch creaks in my life, the further I go.
Well, and everybody has creaking branch moments.
Correct.
Everybody does.
Yes, we do.
And judging from your experience and the way you have used that experience and the way you use the metaphor would remind us that creaking branches are opportunities, actually, to kind of wake us up to the opportunity of what we can and should do to make a difference somewhere in our own lives and in the lives of others.
Well, and to lean into it. A lot of people fear the branch creak moments because they can come from lots of different areas. They can be a gut punch. It could be something that you just simply want and you try to achieve. There's lots of ways that your branch can creak in your life, but it's at those moments that we grow. And it's at those moments that we have true opportunities to adapt to what the world is throwing at us, and we have that ability. And so really my metaphor is more about leaning into being uncomfortable. That when the branch creaks, instead of, looking at it as a negative, which I mean, like, I'm at the point where I don't look at them as negative, no matter how negative they appear at first. I'm like, there's an opportunity at the end of this. There's a reason for me to focus, plan, take action, and be able to, turn this into something else. And one of the ways I keep myself uncomfortable, my real philosophy in life, the way I'm comfortable being uncomfortable, is my philosophy about 9 years ago in life changed to this simple one: say yes, then figure out how. That's it. That's my philosophy on life. If I think something is worthwhile, I will say yes first and then go about figuring out how to do it. I mean, I'll use the book as a great example. If I would have known that it was going to take me 18 months and 23 versions to write the book, I never would have done it. If I would have known it was going to take 12 additional months to get a publisher, I never would have done it. If I would have known it was going to, turn out that I wrote 2 books and slammed them together and the editor said, "Mark, you got to write the other half of the book," I was still I mean, it took 27 or 30 months to get the book done to where, it would become a bestseller and go on to win 8 National Book Awards. But if I wouldn't have made myself uncomfortable, none of that would have ever happened. So I think there is a power, and I share this when I speak to middle school kids, high school kids, college kids around the nation as I go and deliver 90 keynote speeches, each year. I want them to understand that there's a power in failure, that there is, power in the branch creak moment, and don't be afraid of them, but lean into them.
I'm still thinking about the metaphor here, the creaking branch. And then you talk about leaning into. Now that seems counterintuitive. If I'm on a creaking branch, leaning into it might not feel natural, but leaning into it is about action. It's about taking the action that you're talking about.
That is absolutely correct.
Now, what can organizations do to improve performance and retention of younger people who value workplace meaning more than many people did in previous generations? There's so much talk today about meaning in the workplace.
Vision, purpose, and relevance are critically important. And if you draw 3 circles, in a Venn diagram, with vision, purpose, and relevance, the nexus of those 3 things is where action and impact happens. So vision is number 1. Vision is critically important in any organization. It's in our homes, our classroom, our place of business. What are we trying to accomplish? Where are we going? And how does the pride of their contribution, meaning any generations, but particularly Gen Z and Gen Alpha coming up behind them will supersize this, is how does the pride of their contribution add to a greater good? If there is no greater good, you're creating a revolving door, moving around, because if the only greater good is shareholder value and making money, they won't stay long. They just won't, because they'd rather go someplace where there's some kind of positive impact to the community, that there's some kind of positive impact on people, whatever it happens to be, but there has to be some vision beyond shareholder value and simply making money. And so as we move forward in the future, pairing that with flexibility is critically important. They want to live a more flexible life, a work-life blend versus work-life balance, which older generations embraced, a work-life blend, and the pandemic kind of supersized that, the ability to be in the office, be out of the office, be hybrid, however it happens to work out. But they want flexibility, even if they're in the office every day, 5 days a week. They want to be able to go to a game, to an event, to an experience. They want to be able to go to the doctor. They want to be able to take care of their kids. They want to be able to take care of an aging parent. They want to be able to do those things along with the work they do. And the organizations that are best at creating flexibility, yes, even manufacturers, are the ones that are going to thrive and attract significantly more top talent in America today.
Yes, absolutely. And I look at my children and my grandchildren and now my great-grandchildren.
Congratulations, Raj. That's impressive, man.
And if they are an indication of what the future is, we're in good shape. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've got two grandkids myself. They're 10 and 8, and they're fantastic. I mean, they have such a view and they're so clever. And that's why, one of the biggest aha moments that, I share around the nation is how extraordinary young people are today. And when they buy into whatever that compelling relevance and purpose is, they'll move heaven and earth to get there.
Sure.
And it's like our job has to be compelling. Our job is to help create the want to in their life. And there are far too many young people today who don't have a want to. They're just standing still, waiting for something to happen. And we have to recognize is that how we bring them to life in our homes, in our classrooms, our place of business is what connects the dots and the pipelines between education, employment, and ultimately that serves economic development for the viability of every community. And every community is trying to thrive in America today, no matter how large, no matter how small. And it's critical that we are connecting these pipelines for young people so that they know all of the ways to be successful in America today.
Well, now there are many satisfying and high-demand careers that require qualifications other than a traditional college degree. What can employers and organizational leaders do to make these careers more attractive to the Y generation?
I think it's simply a matter of getting rid of the awareness gap. There's a tremendous awareness gap that's fueling our skills gap. Millions of people are unemployed in this nation, but millions of jobs that are open. People who are unemployed can't do the jobs that are open, and it's sitting at a ridiculously high number of millions of jobs that are open, around 10 million. And it's at all levels of education experience. And so when I talk around the nation to understand that, people think that the skills gap in America is a blue collar thing. It's actually an all collar thing. We need more of everything in America. We need more of the right kids going off to 4-year universities and getting, baccalaureates, masters, PhDs, MDs, JDs. There are thousands of careers that are viable through that level of education. But there's also tremendous opportunities in our 2-year community and technical college system in associate's degrees. There's extraordinary opportunities through certifications and licensures and apprenticeship and military and entrepreneurship. We need to be on the table across the board for young people today, all of the ways to be successful in America so that they can choose the education and experience that is most relevant to them. The employers that best connect all of the different things that they need within their organization, right? Every organization needs people at all levels of education and experience. And so recognizing that they're creating a vision that allows younger generations to connect to that vision, regardless of the amount of education experience. And you have to recognize that the world has shifted in a way where college enrollments are significantly down over just 3 years ago. We have 3 million less students in college today than there were 3 years ago. Right. And the world is shifting because it's becoming too expensive. They don't want their younger generations are completely debt averse. So we have to be building the future, and organizations can take the lead on this in lots of ways for them to be successful, but then also be able to work and stay within an organization. You and I were talking about, kind of the time horizon today versus, past, times where people would stay with a company for a long time.
Right.
Well, part of that is organizations that can create the pipelines in their own organization to be able to, with additional training, with additional education, being able to move up in their own organization. So that becomes incredibly important. And again, kind of touching back on flexibility, the ability within those positions to be flexible.
Right.
Hey there, Leadership listeners. We have something special for you. As a thank you for tuning in, we're offering you a free copy of Roger Dean Duncan's award-winning best-selling book, Change Friendly Leadership. In this book, you'll discover a proven framework for leading change that people will actually buy into, without all the stress and resistance that often stand in the way. You'll also learn powerful strategies to improve relationships both at work and at home, creating a healthier, more productive environment for everyone. To claim your free copy, just head over to changefriendly.com. Don't miss out on this opportunity to transform your good intentions into great performance. Again, grab your free copy of this best-selling book at changefriendly.com.
So, what can individual workers do to ensure that their own career development activities make and keep them competitive?
Yeah, I'm so it's a fantastic question, Roger. And one of the things that I have at the heart of what I'm doing around the nation today is that we have to recognize that the world has shifted and we have to frame differently what young people in America are building. In our elementary schools to middle schools to high schools, colleges and beyond, or direct into the workforce. Every learner out there today has to be building their own personal competitive advantage. And it includes three critical things today. It includes robust academic knowledge. It's just as important today as it was 50 years ago, but there's now two things you have to add to academic knowledge. There was a time in America where you could have just academic knowledge. The more academic knowledge you had, the more money you'd make. And there used to be these stair steps, right? If you had each level of education that you went up, you were making more money. That's not necessarily true in America anymore. The world has shifted. Now you need two critical things to go with it. One of those is technical competencies, right? The things you can do in your head and in your hands. So whether you want to be a surgeon or an accountant, whether you want to be a programmer or a chef, whether you want to be in auto technology or biotechnology, you have to have the technical abilities to do it. In fact, Roger, I'll give you a great example. I may have all the academic knowledge to be a surgeon, but the inability to cut somebody open. That's a problem, right? I mean,
Yeah.
to be able to marry, right, your technical and your academic and have them work in concert with each other. And then the third, and probably the most important, Raj, this is what I hear everywhere I go across America today. It's what I call professional skills, right? Work ethic, punctuality, leadership, communication, work-life balance, stress management, critical thinking, problem solving, emotional intelligence, networking, flexibility. I can go on and on. You can go on and on.
That applies everywhere.
It applies everywhere, right? It applies to all of our lives, but that's what it takes to build a personal competitive advantage today. And we're in the process of building systems so that starting in kindergarten, we're talking about these things at the tactical level in the classroom. Kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, because what's happening is that we're focused only on academic knowledge and we're not connecting the critical skills necessary for young people to thrive in their life, to be self-reliant, to be independent, to be able to thrive in a society where we need them every day to show up and have the pride of their contribution, add to a significant good, and that serves the community itself.
So you answered my next question already, and that was, at what point should a young person's career exploration begin? You mentioned kindergarten.
Yeah, that's not necessarily for the exploration. Exploration should start.
But it's awareness, at least, of what opportunities are out there.
Yeah, and that's the subtle nuance I'm adding to your comment.
Right.
What really starts in kindergarten is the building of the personal competitive advantage. You may not know what you want to do yet. You may not know, where you're going, how you're getting there. You may not know any of that, and you don't need to. But the key is we have to build in our young people today a personal competitive advantage that includes academic knowledge, technical competencies, and professional skills. And they need all three of these. And we walk them up until sixth grade, and we're teaching that competitive advantage. Career exploration should kick in a big way in 7th and 8th grade. Everything from job shadowing, the ability to go out on tours, taking field trips to, advanced manufacturing facilities, or getting into healthcare, or seeing what the construction site looks like, just so that they can see, feel, smell, touch, and experience. And there's also a lot of online opportunities to be able to do those kinds of things. And then when they kind of transition from 8th grade, 9th grade, and they're going into the high school, that's when they can supersize their competitive advantage and start building the skills that allow them to understand by the time they hit senior year, where do I want to go? What's the next best great step for me? Is it a 4-year university? Do you want to do something at that level of education and experience? Or could I get a certification or a licensure? Or can I do an apprenticeship? Can I start that way and then maybe, leverage what I want to do from there? But getting, higher education when it's just the right point to get that higher education, if that's what's in the cards for them, based on their own unique interests, talents, and abilities. And we need to shift our thinking. And one of the key, attributes of this is, here's where we sit today. 2/3, according to a national study, 2/3 of high school kids in America today see no value in getting a college degree, and they think they'll be just fine without that degree. 2/3.
Wow.
We have to change what young people are building, and we have to frame it as building competitive advantage.
So what can parents do to help prepare their children to succeed in our evolving economy? Parents of really young children and parents of junior high school and high school students, what can parents do?
It's recognizing that they have to build academic knowledge, technical competencies, and professional skills. We've lost that to some degree because we're so focused on test scores and high grades.
Right.
But I ask every business in America I go to, and there'll be a lot of them listening to this podcast. There's 2 things I run people through. The first is, why does a straight A student show up every day and do all the work we ask them to do? They do it because in an intrinsic, either internal or external way, meaning they're either being forced by their parents or internally they're motivated to do it on their own. They want a competitive advantage. They believe if they get straight A's, they'll get into potentially a better school, they'll get into better opportunities, that there's some value and benefit to getting straight A's. And it is true, right? I mean, you can have all those opportunities. But once you recognize that a straight A student is looking for a competitive advantage, then what do the 3.0s, 2.0s, and 1.0 students believe?
Right.
See, they're not looking at life the same way. So if they're not building a competitive advantage, they're standing still and they're not moving forward. And so to recognize in America the power for parents, for our educational system, and even our employers to recognize is that students with straight A's view education as their solution. Students with 3 points, 2 points, and 1 points tend to view education as their problem. And we have to shift that in America today if we're going to move and save future generations for themselves, because it must become everybody's solution. The only way to do that is to make competitive advantage the thing they're building and not high academic grades. Sure, high academic grades is a component, but I ask every business in America, would you take someone with a 2.4 grade point average, but they had technical competencies and they crushed professional skills, right? They can communicate, they show up on time, they show up consistently, they're drug free, and they're completely engaged every day in contributing to the organization. Would you take a 2.4 student? I get every business in America goes, yes, we would. Well, then what are we building? We have to be building all 3 things, because you can be wildly successful in America with a 4.6 grade point average. But let's face it, you can be wildly successful in America with a 3.7 or a 2.5.
Sure.
So if that's true, then we have to adjust how we build this connection. In our homes, that's where our parents come in. In our classrooms, that's where our educational system comes in. And even in our places of business, where we're taking and leveraging the best of all 3 things, academic, technical, and professional skills, and we're helping people get to where they want to go.
I look back at my own parents whose education stopped at high school. In fact, they got married while they were in high school. They never went to any school beyond that, and yet their own children have PhDs, law degrees, master's degrees because of several things, but our parents taught us how exciting and fulfilling it is to learn. They taught us the joy of learning. This is back in the day when about the only resource in town was the public library. And we would go every Saturday and come back home with a bunch of books. And that paid dividends. And now I think it's paying dividends for succeeding generations. So parents can have they have a huge impact for good or ill.
Yeah, well, they do. Part of the things that, I advocate for, and actually my company is creating systems for, K-6 and then for middle schools and high schools, and we're kind of connecting a K-16 model. But part of the things that parents can do, as well as our educators, is we have to understand that we have to teach young people how to regulate themselves, how to manage themselves, how to develop coping skills so that they can cope with what happens. I mean, I hear from every parent and educator and employer in the nation, man, young people today, they can't handle stress. They can't, they're not, they're slow to problem solve. They can't regulate their emotions, and all these kinds of things. But that's something we all have to deal with, right?
Sure.
Adults have to deal with that. Kids have to deal with that. But communication, active listening, leadership, teamwork, problem solving, critical thinking, these are all critical things that every parent can be involved in with their kids to recognize that, they need a slice of all of this. And that's how they connect together and be able to move forward.
Right. Those are common denominators of success.
Across the board, no matter how old you are.
Exactly. Now, my friend Stephen M.R. Covey talks a lot about the differences between command and control and trust and inspire leadership approaches. What do you see as leadership styles that are most successful in a workplace with multiple generations?
Yeah, that's a great question. And please tell your friend Stephen I said hello.
I will.
I would love to meet him one day. For me, it comes down to, and the best of the best that I have, I've experienced, and, things that I tried to do in my own leadership, with my company is, topping the list is integrity. Having integrity, and I don't know that everybody puts that on the top of their list. It's on the top of my list, is that you have to have integrity, because if the people that you work with and who work for, or you work for, don't understand that, your character and the way your integrity, shows up long before you do, I think that's important. I think great leaders today build vision, and that vision is critically important because they have to create that thing that everybody buys into getting to. I call it the rally point. And it can't be shareholder value and making money. There has to be some reason we do what we do, and people have to buy into that. This is a good thing, right? And for some companies, it's easier than others. And there's certainly challenges with certain widgets and things. It's like, well, what's that purpose? And I'm not saying it's an easy journey, but you have to create the vision. And, and sometimes it could be what you're doing with the extra money and you're giving to Habitat for Humanity, but there better be a vision that is contributing to the community in a very special way, or younger generations will simply go somewhere that has that, because the people who create vision are the ones who are going to thrive in the smart machine age moving forward with AI and automation. But then communication and delegation, you can go down a whole list of things that I think that are important, as a good leader today, but integrity and vision are at the top of it. And the ability to create flexibility and create a workplace that is not toxic, but healthy, vibrant, collaborative. And you have to, as a leader, recognize that collaboration is great. Everybody collaborates. I hear people talk about collaboration. If you're not reaching consensus, though, your collaboration is a waste of time.
Right.
I think far too many organizations waste their time collaborating. Make consensus the goal of the day. How are we moving forward? How do we make a decision and then keep going? And if you make the wrong decision, don't be afraid to back up and go in a different direction.
Well, I'm frequently reminded that as human beings, all of us listen to that internal radio station, WIIFM, What's in it for me?
Yeah.
And that, at first blush, that might sound selfish, but it's human. And I think good leaders are aware that their people are asking internally, whether they realize it or not, what's in it for me? And that goes right back to what you've been talking about, vision and meaning. That's what people are looking for, not only in the workplace, but in life.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, in fact, that's what younger generations are thriving to find. Their lifestyle is the most important decision to them. In fact, every decision they make is based on how it affects their lifestyle. Careers become a lifestyle decision. And that's an important aha that I give around the nation is that if you want to start any substantive career conversation, either in a home, classroom, or place of business with the younger generations today, you don't start with career, start with lifestyle. Right? Two
Right.
questions I love to ask the young people in my sphere of influence. What do you love to do and what do you do well? Because the answer to those two questions leads you to a myriad of follow-up questions that allow you to discern where do they sit, in their mindset of experiences, how they want to live, where they want to live, no matter how young they are, right? They all have a view of what life looks like, and it can change every single day. So no matter how grand, modest, or laid back that view, they have to build a competitive advantage to achieve it. And there are people who want 2 hot meals a day, but there are people who want to be millionaires, make millions of dollars and everything in between. So until you really kind of know what their lifestyle goals and aspirations are, it's very hard to connect career conversations and exploration that's meaningful unless you understand what their wants are. And it can change every day. And I said, no matter how grand, modest, or laid back, this is usually an aha moment when I travel the nation. We tend to talk to young people, in our sphere of influence like they all could or should have grand plans. Most of Gen Z and Gen Alpha coming up behind them will be the same way. They actually have pretty modest and laid back views of their life. The fun they want to have, they want to hang out with their friends, they want to do some experiences, they want, they have a certain way they're looking at their life, and that's what drives them forward. And so to be relevant to everyone in our sphere of influence, we have to recognize you have to kind of scratch the itch no matter how grand, modest, or laid back they view their life.
Seems to me that part of being a good leader is helping your people understand and discover the art of the possible.
Yes.
They might not have a really tightly focused vision of what can be before them, but if you can help them understand that there are possibilities and become adept at the art of the possible, then their creativity will kick in and they'll discover things that they hadn't even dreamed about.
Yeah, and one of the things I talk about too is that young people will hardly or ever make forever decisions, but they will make a for now decision.
Right.
A for now decision is one that can change next week, next month, next year. It kind of unlocks that analysis paralysis that sometimes can get all of us. I just want to keep looking at this and looking at this and look at. But if they're willing to make a for now decision, and then pivot if a change comes along, it at least unlocks their ability to start moving forward.
Right. So, Mark, what do you see from our nation's history that underscores America's ability to step up and deal effectively with the crisis? For example, World War II, Sputnik, COVID, etc. How can that collective resolve be applied to the skills gap?
Well, I think that's a wonderful question, and it kind of brings I end my presentations with my favorite movie line of all time, and I think it's relevant to your question. My favorite movie line of all time, and it runs my whole life, is in the movie Apollo 13. It's the end. It's the beginning of the movie, and it's July 20th, 1969, and Tom Hanks playing Commander Jim Lovell and his wife are throwing a party at their Houston home to celebrate the fact that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin are walking on the moon for the very first time. My line happens at the end of the night. Guests have all gone home, beer cans strewn all over the backyard, and the Lovells are laying out in their chase lounges, and they're looking up at the moon, and Tom Hanks looks at the moon, looks at his wife, and casually says these words. From now on, we live in a world where man has walked on the moon. It wasn't a miracle. We just decided to go.
Right.
That goes to your question, right? We just decided to go, right? It was a Branch Creek moment. It was a Branch Creek moment that we then, hundreds of thousands of Americans would work tirelessly to create things that had never been created before to accomplish John F. Kennedy's goal, which was set out in May 25th, 1961, beginning of the decade, that by the end of the decade, we're going to land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth. We do these things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. And we connect that dot. We accomplished it by the end of the decade. It wasn't a miracle. We just decided to go. And I think that's the power of Branch Creek moments. And in solving the skills gap, we have to recognize that this is that moment. the things we even just touched on just so lightly on this podcast already, what young people think, what makes them tick, how they make decisions, how we can help them build a competitive advantage in their life at all grade point averages so that they are prepared to build a self-reliant and independent future for themselves that allows them to live how they want to live. And it opens up every organization out there to find top talent of people who have, the kinds of skills that are necessary to make an organization thrive. It doesn't take a miracle to do any of this. We just have to make a decision to go. And that's how we shift our educational system. It's how we adapt our employment and workforce development systems, and how ultimately this all serves economic development for the viability of every community. And that's what I'm striving across America to, is to help every community thrive by understanding these powerful concepts, in rallying our communities around the fact that we can, in fact, pivot during this, Branch Creek moment nationwide where the world is changing every day. But we can also bring young people along with us as the solution and not the problem.
Right. And the good news is that our history shows us that we can do pretty much whatever we decide to do.
That's true.
Now, going back to your tree story, which is a wonderful theme here, does the Y generation hear the branch creaking? And if not, why not? And if not, what can be done to help them hear it and inspire them to do something about it?
Yeah, absolutely. The branch is creaking. They understand it. Hope's at an all-time low. Engagement's at an all-time low. They're not sure what opportunities they have. Things seem out of reach for them. They are in the midst of a huge, whether it's conscious or subconscious, branch creek moment, that they recognize that things are not going well for those older than them, and they're questioning what's going to be possible for them. The housing market is out of control. Whether they're ever going to be able to have a home, live in a home, or even be able to rent a home, they don't. As they get older, as they go through our educational system, we have to empower them to recognize that there is a place for them in our economy. And that they're critically important to that economy and to the economic viability of every community. So, I believe that young people today can have hope. When I speak to middle school, high school kids and college kids, which I do quite frequently, and I love that, I give a 45-minute presentation on how to build a personal competitive advantage in their life. And I hold them scope locked for 45 minutes. I hold them scope locked because I make it so compelling, relevant, and purposeful for what they're building in their life and how to view it and how they can step forward in it. And we just have to be able to make this a little more systemic in the way we do things.
Well, Mark, what question do you wish I had asked, but I didn't? And how would you respond?
We covered so much, Roger. I don't know that I have a question that would be easy to answer in just, kind of a closing moment, if that's the moment we're at. Maybe how we pivot education and make it more appealing to young people today so that more feel as though it's a solution and not their problem. And what I see when I speak to middle school, high school kids, and college kids is that education is the draining point, and it really shouldn't be that. We have to recognize that to some degree around the country, we're solving the wrong problems at the federal and state levels, and we need to recognize that we have to pivot what's important. State testing, I don't have a dog in the hunt whether we should or we shouldn't state test, but I'll tell you, whatever system we have right now is not working. Nobody in America, or very few people in America, even know who the number 1, 2, and 3 states are. I ask that question in my audiences, and I find that unbelievably interesting. We're the most competitive nation in the world. And if you were the number 1 state, wouldn't you be going around saying, look, we're the number 1 state in state testing, but even the number 1 state doesn't, jump in and thrive and chime in on that. Because we're not being successful there. We're not building enough human connections with kids. We're not freeing up our teachers, our superintendents, our principals, our administrators, counselors, paraprofessionals, special needs folks. We're not freeing them up with a significantly more bandwidth to create the human connection that is a non-negotiable for younger generations. They need a human connection to move forward before they open up their skulls to us, but yet we're trying to dump more into their skulls but taking away the ability to build that human connection. So a lot of those things have to pivot, but that's probably the question I would have asked. And that's the question and probably the way I would have answered it.
All right. Terrific. Well, thank you so much, Mark. You're certainly addressing some of the most important issues in the workplace of today and tomorrow, and we appreciate your joining us on Leadership.
Roger, an honor to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. To learn more about Mark and his work, go to markcperna.com. That's markcperna, Perna.com. And to grab a free copy of my book, Change Friendly Leadership, go to changefriendly.com. changefriendly.com. In other episodes of Leadership, I share my exclusive conversations with top thought leaders who offer smart tips to boost your effectiveness in both your professional and personal life. My guests include superstars like Stephen M. R. Covey, Liz Wiseman, Doug Conant, Heather Younger, Marshall Goldsmith, Amy Edmondson, Bill George, Jessica Chen, Guy Kawasaki, Dana Perino, David Ulrich, and many others who have insightful things to say that you can put to good use immediately. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you can stay informed on what's coming your way. Trust me, folks, you don't want to miss any of our episodes. We appreciate those 5-star reviews, and if you leave a comment, it keeps those algorithms busy promoting our podcast around the world. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, stay safe, be happy, and spread good cheer wherever you go. For Leadership, I'm Roger Dean Duncan.